Hello everyone. So welcome to the thesis protocol writing workshop. This time we are not using Zoom
Amir, I can't hear you.
I think Amir has lost connection.
Yeah, Amir is still.
I think there's some problem with his internet.
sorry the connection. The connection was lost internet problem. So we will begin with the principal's address. The principal has given a video message just today afternoon. He was not available at this time, so he said I will like to address the all the postgraduates who have joined the college and also welcome for this workshop. So I will just play his address and then we will start with the first session.
Very nice to see you all in this writing workshop. And first of all, I would like to welcome students who joined this year for various postgraduate in various disciplines. And I'm sure you are in an institution which has you are in an institution which has a very huge load, and you are in an institution which certainly where faculty and everyone is so energetic and enthusiastic. You come out with flying colors, not only in books, but in life as well. I think it is now, you are almost 6 years in this, reading various subjects, and during these 6 years, you have understood quite a lot about the evolution of medicine. Well, medicine has evolved over many centuries in different parts of the world, and olden medicines of uh, Europe or Indian subcontinent and Chinese, they were all based on religious and philosophical assumptions. They were all observation based, which were passed on to next generation for very slowly. And hence, there was a slow rise and development of medicine. Somewhere around
Was it audible?
No,
No, not very clear, not at all clear.
it was not clear.
Not at all clear or not audible at all?
No, not clear.
There were
Not clear.
one or two words here and there, sort of. There was a lot of breakage.
Okay. So I will have to rework on it. So I think we will start with the presentation. We can play this message later. I will try to see what I can, how I can make this video better, and then I will play this video somewhere in between. This message is there with us, so I don't think there is an issue. Sir actually has welcomed everyone and the new batch. So let us now move on to the first presentation. The first presentation is by Dr. Binita Kashyap. She is in the microbiology department of our college, and she will be taking us through the research question part. So over to you, Dr. Binita, and now you are the presenter. You can present your screen and you can start
Okay,
with
yes,
the
please.
presentation.
Okay, I'm doing it, Amber. Just give me a second. Am I audible?
Yes, Dr.
Yes.
Binita, you are audible.
Okay, and is the screen visible?
Yes, the screen is perfectly
Yes, it
visible.
is.
Please go.
Okay. Okay, so thank you, Dr. Amir. Good evening, everyone. At the outset, I would like to really thank Dr. Amir for having me here and for giving me a chance to get involved with this thesis protocol workshop. I have been asked to talk on research question and hypothesis. But before starting my presentation, I would request everyone to just go through this slide for a minute. All right. So after reading this, I'm sure we all would be convinced that research question at least forms a very crucial component of any research. In fact, a good research question forms the backbone of a good research. Now see, there's so much of research happening everywhere. The most important problem that I feel is an absent question. What happens is you cannot include everything in your research. So it's always a good idea to have a question in mind. When you have a question in mind, what happens is that it is much easier to do a research while answering a question rather than just moving around the topic, because at one point of time you do become clueless and directionless if you have nothing to answer to. So that is why a research question is important. So in this session, we are going to understand the key elements of a good research question and hypothesis, and we would also try to understand the process of developing a research question and hypothesis. So let's just begin with what is not a research question. First of all, the huge amount of literature that you're going to start searching the minute you get your topic is not a research question. The data that you would be obtaining while your topic is finalized is also not a research question. And the statistical analysis that you're going to put into your data once you're throughout the process of the research, that is absolutely not a research question. So then what is a research question? See, there is an area of concern and there is some existing uncertainty in that area of concern. So a research question aims to explore that existing uncertainty in the area of concern, and it points towards the need for a deliberate investigation to solve that problem. Okay, so a research question is not only helpful in identifying the problem, it will guide you towards the methodology. It will also help you to build up a good hypothesis. It would be an asset because it will not only detail the problem statement, it will describe and refine also the issue that you're going to address to. It will add focus to the problem statement. It will guide in your data collection and analysis. And finally, it will set a context to your research. So as I said, you do require a research question. Why? Because it is going to help you remain focused in your research throughout. It is going to lay a guiding path in front of you throughout the research process and the writing process. More importantly, it is going to set boundaries and limits to your research so that you know till what point you have to continue, where do you have to stop, and where do you want to go next. So when you think about a research question, the most important thing that you should know is what is already known about a topic and what remains to be researched in a topic. That is the boundary between current knowledge and ignorance. And how do you come to know about this? This you will understand while having brainstorming discussions with your friends, colleagues, seniors, supervisors, friends. You might be interested in some untested theory. You might be interested while your practical experience, you might see some area of concern or some difficulties that you need to eliminate or some conditions that you feel that needs improvement. You might like to do clinical appraisal of some scientific literature. There might be some gaps in literature, some questions that need to be answered. So you would like to address to all this. So all these situations will help you to arrive at a research question. So let's just see what are the characteristics of a good research question. To begin with, your research question must be focused. It should neither be vague nor be broad. It should be specific enough to be well covered within the limitations that a researcher is going to do the research in, be in terms of money, be in terms of study population, patient, time, anything, right? The second point is the research question should be arguable. That is, the research question should be such that at least there are 2 or more answers, possible explanations or answers available to that research question. Third, your research question must be complex. I would say arguably complex. Your research question must not be such that it is answered by a simple yes or no, or by answered by very easily found fact. You know, it must at least require research and analysis on the part of the researcher. Then clear. See, there's so much of research around us every time and on any topic that you have to be as clear as possible. Sometimes the complexity in a question, in a research question, contains many hidden, unclear, opinions or unclear facts, and this might result in a confused research. So just be clear enough. And last point is that your research question should be concise, because you have to know your boundaries, you have to know your limits, and just be as clear as possible, as concise as possible. So keep on asking yourself, is your research question too broad? Now, if it is too broad, you're likely to end up with no answer. Similarly, is it too narrow? Now, if it is too narrow, what will happen is your research question will not be motivating or compelling enough, and the conclusion that you would obtain at the end, you would not be able to generalize it to the population or the community. Does your study matter? And if at all it matters, to whom does it matter? That's very important. Then whenever you pose a question, you must know whether it can be answerable. Can you address to that question? What kind of data, what kind of analysis you require to address to that question? So whenever you sit to form a good research question, there are certain criteria to be followed. There are certain formats to be followed. Finer Maps criteria highlights or gives you the best properties or characteristics of a good research question. And PICOT format is a format that contains few components that need to be there inside the research question. So coming to the finer criteria for good research question, F is feasible. As you all understand, feasibility means the research should be within the capacity or within the ability of the researcher to complete it in terms of fund, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of study population. What I'm trying to say is that we should generally be very realistic as regards the scope of any study. Interesting. I is interesting. Interesting, of course, your study should be interesting. Only if it is interesting to you will it interest the other peer of your field, right? And only if it is interesting, you would like to explore the topic and you would like to back it with an academic and an intellectual debate. So if it is interesting, the topic will keep you motivated throughout the process. And if it is not interesting, you will start finding it tedious. Third is novel. N is novel. Novel is your study should be new. It cannot be a copy question from the investigators of your friends or other people. It has to have a scope of being investigated. You can either find a new finding, you can establish few other aspects of an already established finding, you can confirm or refute an earlier finding, do whatever you want to, but there has to be some novelty attached to the topic that you're going to research. E is ethical. Ethical, of course, is a mandatory requirement, and it is going to be every research that you undertake has to obtain ethical approval by competent authority, and this includes very important parameters like, for example, privacy or confidentiality of the patient, the right of the patient to withdraw from the research at any time he wants to, or the fact that you do not do any harm to the patient while you're researching, right? So there are many other things in the ethical component. And finally, it is relevant. Relevant, the topic must be of academic and intellectual relevance to the people of the field that you have chosen. The question must arise from the areas of concern in current scenario. The question must establish a clear purpose with respect to the field that you have chosen. You can do anything. You can fill up a gap in knowledge. You can try to compare different approaches. You can try to analyze a academic assumption or a practical practice, or you can even try to study or a developmental practice in any specific population. Whatever you're trying to do, it should have some relevance in the context that you're going to do the research in. And maps is M is manageable. It's almost like feasibility. The researcher must be able to manage the research. Appropriate is the research should be scientifically and logically appropriate. Potential value and publishability is that whatever be the research, however simple or small be the research, it should have some impact, some health impact, some economic impact on the population. And systematic means the research should be structured in a specified sequence as per defined set of rules or laws of nature. So this is finer MAPS criteria. So when you finally design the research question, PICO formula has to be taken into consideration. These are 4 components that are important, and you have to see whether your research question has all these components. P is for patient population or problem that you're addressing to. I would be any intervention or exposure that you are doing in the study. C is whether you're comparing it with a benchmark or any gold standard. And O is the outcome that you're expecting. I'd like to give an example here. For example, my research question is, does hand washing decrease the rate of hospital-acquired infections? So my P is what? The main problem that I'm addressing to is your hospital-acquired infection. So P is your hospital-acquired infection. What is the intervention? Intervention is hand washing, right? Comparison is that you're comparing hand washing with any other thing but hand washing. That could be no hand washing or hand rubbing or PP or any other thing, but it is not hand washing. Anything else which might contribute in reducing the hospital-acquired infection. And 4th is outcome. What would be the outcome in this case? A reduced rate of hospital-acquired infection. So this is how you're going to test every research question, whether it is incorporating all these important components or not. Sometimes it is also called PCOT format, that is T is added to it to include the time factor. So finally, when you design a research question, you can just do a self-assessment. A few small questions you can keep on asking yourself and see whether your question falls into that criteria, whether it is flexible. You have a winning research question or not. It's flexible, open-ended. Does it answer all your questions? Is it simple? Is it doable? And if all these things have been covered, does it matter? Does your result matter? So how do you develop a good research question? What you do is you just choose a topic of interest, a broad topic of interest and of concern. So I've chosen a topic. Now what you do is you can start doing literature search on that topic. The purpose of literature search is first of all to update yourself regarding all the developments about that topic, and later on you know what is already known about that topic and what remains to be researched in that topic. Okay, so you narrow down the topic depending on what is already known and what remains to be known. Finally, you start asking questions and you start narrowing down the questions as well, and you in the end start focusing on the few relevant questions that you want to pursue. So you write the question in your own words as complete as possible, taking into consideration the finer map criteria and the PCOT format, and then you can even divide your question into 2-3 small concepts. For example, I have a broad topic in my mind, women's health. So I narrow down my topic to women and cancer, and then I can focus my topic as women smokers and breast cancer. So a research question can be designed on that based on these headings. Is there any association between cigarette smoking and breast cancer risk? So this is how gradually from a broad topic you're going to narrow down and finally reach a research question. And this is how the hourglass notion of research works. You start with a broad topic of concern to everybody, narrow down, focus on that, operationalize, observe the data, analyze the data, reach some conclusions, generalize back the conclusions to the community. So A good researcher will think globally. Globally means you're going to talk of a problem which is of concern, which is important, and then but act locally. When you sit to design a research question, you have to be very precise, very specific, because not everything on the earth you can research in one thesis. So you have to think globally, but act locally. So let's just come across three examples of good research question. Like first example is, why are social networking sites harmful? Now, nobody can be more unclear than this. I mean, we're not mentioning this site that we're talking about. We're not mentioning the kind of harm that we're talking about, right? So a clearer version would be, how are online users experiencing or addressing privacy issues on social networking sites like MySpace and Facebook. Another example is, what is the effect on environment from global warming? Now, I don't even think there could be one on any, I mean, you can even answer this question. It's such a vast thing. There's so many things, so many aspects attached to this. So a better focused version would be, how is glacial melting affecting penguins in Antarctica? This is one aspect. You can study any other aspect you want to. Third example is, how are doctors addressing diabetes in the US? Now, isn't this too simple? I mean, I don't know what is expected out of the researcher here. So you can make it little appropriately complex, like what are the common traits of those suffering from diabetes in America, and how can these commonalities be used to aid the medical community in prevention of the disease? Okay. So my second part of the session is hypothesis. And what is a hypothesis? Let's see what definition is written here. A supposition or proposed explanation made on the basis of limited evidence as a starting point for further investigation. All right. In simple words, hypothesis is a simple, testable, and a simple testable prediction. You know, it is just a prediction of what a researcher expects to see in the research. Okay, so it is just a prediction of researcher's expectation. Remember, a hypothesis need not always be correct. It can be wrong also. So hypothesis is the prediction of what the researcher expects, and research, the goal of a research is to see whether that guess of the researcher was right or wrong. All right, so it is a very powerful tool, and because hypothesis will let you identify the research objectives, it will let you identify the key abstract concepts involved in the research, and it will identify its relationship to the problem statement and the literature review that is available. Hypothesis is usually seen as the investigator's eye, because it helps investigator to find answers to the tentatively adopted generalizations that are there. It will help the researcher to stay focused on the research throughout. It will serve as a link between the theory that the investigator has gained and the investigation that he's planning to do. It will place very clear and specific goals in front of the researcher. It will act as a link, and it will help to organize all the huge information and fact that is available with the researcher, which at times might become very difficult. And most importantly, hypothesis will prevent blind research. What is blind research? Irrelevant research, which makes no sense and which has no relevance in the current context. So what are the types of hypothesis? Generally, we start with null hypothesis. Null hypothesis is a what do you say, conventional approach of making a prediction. Means it is a statement that generally says there is no relationship between two or more variables that the researcher is trying to study. Let's see an example here. If I have two groups of students, one group of students participate in extracurricular activities, the other group doesn't participate, and my research is about comparing the academic performance between these two groups. So null hypothesis will have a statement saying there is no difference in the academic performance of the students in between these two groups. All right. Now, so it is generally a theory that has been put forward because either we believe it is true or we just use it as a basis of argument, though it is not tested to be true. When you reject a null hypothesis, we reach the alternate hypothesis or a research hypothesis. For example, if I want to compare, see the relationship between music and emotion. So your alternate hypothesis will say that there is a relationship between music and emotion. So when we reject a null hypothesis, we obtain what is alternate hypothesis. And you have to remember that alternate and null hypotheses are mutually exclusive. If one is true, the other has to be false. One thing you have to remember is that null hypothesis is always rejected. It's already accepted. You do not have the power to accept null hypothesis. You either reject null hypothesis in favor of the alternate hypothesis, or you do not reject null hypothesis. All right. So the burden of proof is only on the alternative hypothesis. We say we reject null hypothesis. We do not reject null hypothesis. So let's see what a good hypothesis should be like. A good hypothesis should never be a question. It should always be a declarative statement. A good hypothesis must be testable. As I told you in the beginning, it should be verifiable and falsifiable. It need not be always correct. It can be proven false. A good hypothesis, like a research question, must be specific, precise, and clear. A good hypothesis also should be very simple, understandable, clear, manageable by the researcher. A hypothesis is good if it establishes all the variables very clear and it tells you what relationship it is seeking to find between those variables. It should be non-conflicting and non-contradictory to the existing set of rules, and it should be conducive to further inquiry. And as I said before also, it should be feasible within the scope of the research. So now we say that a hypothesis is complete only when it has three components. It should have population, it should have variables, and it should have the relationship between the two variables. All right. So if I say, if I do this to X, this happens to Y. I'm doing something to X and something is happening to Y. So your X becomes the independent variable and your Y becomes the dependent variable. So the variable in which you are manipulating, in which you're doing a manipulation or a change, that is your independent variable, and the variable that gets affected due to the manipulation in the independent variable and the variable that you can measure, that is called the dependent variable. You can even test your hypothesis. And how do you do it? These things will be probably covered in detail during the statistical thing, but right now I'm just trying to sensitize you with this. Your hypothesis testing would be dependent on the decision that you take about the null hypothesis. You do not write accept. I'm sorry, accept is the wrong word here. So you either reject a null hypothesis or you do not reject a null hypothesis. So let's see, we have two correct decisions that we can reach. What are those? When we reject a null hypothesis and the null hypothesis turns out to be false, that means the decision was correct. And when I do not reject a null hypothesis and the null hypothesis turns out to be true, that is a correct decision. Now there are two situations where there could be errors. When I reject null hypothesis and it happens to be true, that is type 1 error, and this is usually the false positive cases, and it is supposed to be a serious error. When I do not reject null hypothesis and the null hypothesis turns out to be false, that is type 2 error, and these are usually the false negative ones. So remember, when we do not reject the null hypothesis, that means the differences between the variables probably have arisen due to chance or are accidental. But when we reject null hypothesis, that means the difference between the variables are significant, statistically significant. So both the hypothesis and the research question, they tend to identify a problem, then they identify the possible solution to the problem, and they predict the outcome. But on one hand, whereas the hypothesis is predictive in nature, I told you it's a predictive statement, research question is inquisitive in nature. Whereas hypothesis is a prediction about the relationship between two or more variables, a research question is a simple question that research sets to find answer for. Now, obviously, because in a hypothesis you're doing a prediction, so that it can only be used when you have some amount of knowledge or previous research on the subject, whereas a research question can be used if there is little previous research on the subject, because you're not predicting anything, you're just putting a question. While a hypothesis can be used in experimental and quantitative studies, a research question can be used in both quantitative and qualitative studies. And because in hypothesis, we are already predicting something. So we are not allowing a wide range of outcomes in a hypothesis. Whereas in a research question, it will allow a wide range of outcomes because we've just put in a question and we have not predicted any point. So this is the path. This is the last slide. This is the path going from formulation of a research question to the development of a hypothesis. We choose a topic of our interest, perform a lot of literature search to know what are the current trends and the advances in our topic, and to know what is the boundary between the current knowledge, the existing knowledge, and the lacunae in the topic. Then we seek input from our experts, mentor, colleagues, collaborators, anybody, and then you use finer maps criteria to develop a good research question. Then you ensure that the research question that you formulated follows PCOT format, and finally you develop a good hypothesis from the research question. So that's all in my session, Dr. Amir.
Thank you, Dr. Binita. So I think we have some time for question answers.
Yeah.
So if there are some questions, there is a hand raised by Tamid Anban. Tamid, you unmute yourself, please. I have unmuted. Tamid, you unmute yourself and you can ask your question, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
No, sir. As such, I didn't have any questions, sir, but the session was a bit fast, sir. We couldn't follow it. So I just told ma'am to go slow, sir.
Sorry?
Ma'am, the session was a bit fast, ma'am. The slides were
Yeah, I had to go fast because we had instructions to stick to time. I'm sorry. You can just let me know if you didn't follow something.
Okay, ma'am.
Could you let me know your doubt? I can just repeat that.
No, such, ma'am.
Okay, so next question is from Akansha Agarwal. Akansha, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, sir.
Yes, please ask.
Ma'am, what is the difference between type 1 and type 2 errors? And
Yeah, that's
what was the, can you please repeat the relation between null and alternate hypothesis again?
Yeah, see, these things will be talked in detail during your statistical lectures, maybe statistical related lectures, but I just wanted to, apprise you of that. So the type 1, can I again go back to the slide so that, how do I share it? Okay, anyways, so type 1 errors usually are your false positive ones. Type 1 is when you reject a null hypothesis. First, let me explain you null hypothesis and alternate hypothesis. When you want to establish a relationship between two variables and you say that there is no relationship between the two variables. I gave you the example of that academic performance between extracurricular and doing children and not doing children. Okay, so then when you assume that there is no relationship, that is null hypothesis. And when you reject a null hypothesis, that means you're giving a statement that there is a relationship, that is an alternate hypothesis. All right. So when you reject a null hypothesis and your null hypothesis turns out to be true, you're understanding my point? So that is your type 1, which is false positive. The table shows it very clearly. And similarly, you have type 2 errors, which are the false negative ones. That means you do not reject. In other words, you accept, you do not use that word, but you do not reject a null hypothesis and it turns out to be false. Is that clear? So that is type 2, and that is generally false negative. Have you understood?
Yes, ma'am. Why can't we reject alternate hypothesis?
No, you reject a null hypothesis in favor of an alternate. Hypothesis can be corrected. Hypothesis is never always correct. Okay, so just to start a research, you're putting in, I told you in the beginning that null hypothesis, you either use it as a comparison just because you believe that it might be true, or it is not tested, but I just want to use it as a comparison. You have to have a comparison standard, no? So you've started with a null hypothesis, and then you prove whether your null, it's almost like when you're rejecting a null hypothesis, you're accepting your alternate hypothesis. And when you're not rejecting a null hypothesis, that means you're rejecting your alternate hypothesis. You understanding? So it is just to start, give a direction to, see, both these hypotheses in research question are just to give a direction to your thesis, to your research work. That's all.
Oh, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Binita. Just I would like, if you permit, to remove the fear, because the students are very much afraid of hypothesis and type 1 and type 2 error.
Dr. Amir, who better than Dr. Amir can talk? I'm sorry, I'm speaking in front of you, but who better than who can talk?
To just tell the students to be very relaxed about this.
Yeah.
Because you start with it is a promise that we start with a null hypothesis. We don't start saying that they are related. We say that they are not related. This does not cause that. So when the cause and the disease, or the risk factor and disease, you want to find an association, as Dr. Binita said. So you start with there is no relation, unbiased. You don't want to be biased right at the beginning. So because of that only, you can either accept that or reject that, because you start with null hypothesis. As Dr. Akansha asked, why don't we reject alternate hypothesis? Because we don't start with alternate hypothesis. That is why we can't accept or reject alternate hypothesis. We start with null hypothesis, as Dr. Binita said. So what we start with, we can either accept that or we can reject that. Thank you. So why we come to the next question. Dr. Anam Ansari, can you unmute yourself, please? I have unmuted Dr. Anam. Okay, so we go to the next, Dr. Divya. Can you unmute yourself and ask your question? You have raised your hand. Dr. Yash Kotiwal. Dr. Yash.
Good evening, ma'am. Ma'am, my question is, ma'am, as you explained in the finer criteria, ma'am, that your hypothesis should be novel, like it should be new. Ma'am, like there are thousands or lakhs of research going on presently. So, ma'am, it might be a chance that your hypothesis collide with some other topic. So, is it ethical that our hypothesis topic question matches?
No. I said that novel means you're not doing a Nobel Prize winning research here, right? Noble means that it has to be new in. You might, I mean, we all get inspired by other good research happening everywhere in the world, but the point is there has to be some aspect, very little, a small aspect also, which you feel that needs to be researched. It might, you might be doing one research which might be being done by several other researchers at the same time. That's perfectly all right. But you are explaining yourself that this is the lacuna in the existing literature of the topic that you've chosen, and you feel that this needs to be researched. But remember, it is not a, I mean, nothing is new here. I mean, it is going to coincide with any research in any part of the world. That's fine. But you should convince yourself and to the others that this part is not well researched and this needs some attention. And that is why you're addressing to, it could be anything. It could be in one little aspect, the geographical area, anything, the incidence, the prevalence, the risk factor. But you feel that you need to research on that. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Binita, you can give an example of your own student's thesis, how it was like different.
That was novel because CT value was not related to the. I'll tell you why. Yes. It's not a Nobel Prize winning, but please, the CT value that.
Dr. Binita, can you please tell the research question?
My research question was: does I don't know, these children will understand CT value or not. Cyclic threshold value is used in a molecular test, okay, to know the viral load. So my thesis was on TB, and I wanted to know, we get a CT value and we just say that it is positive, low or high or positive or negative. So my research question was, does that numerical CT value in TB correlate with the clinical scoring? Now we consulted with the medicine people, and we developed a clinical scoring that there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 करके दो तरह की scoring थी, and we knew the severity of the patient. So till date, at least we always write to the best of my knowledge, because I don't know who all have researched where. So we just thought that till date there was no correlation, because we say the clinicians know CT value is high, low, whatever, but they do not know whether it is correlating well or how bad or how good with the clinical picture. So that was our research question, that clinical. So our hypothesis was, we should have started with null hypothesis, but in the heart of my hearts, I feel that it should be correlating with the clinical condition. So because as Dr. Amir said, we start the conventional approach is to start with a null hypothesis, that there is no relation. So you're safe.
Yeah,
There's no relation. Now you do whatever you want.
Yes, I think now it is clear, because as Dr. Yash will agree that tuberculosis pe already much work is going on, and also CT values also work is going on, clinical scoring also something, but here the researcher has tried to correlate the two things. This was not done earlier. So you will find that the topics will be similar, but certain things will be new in that. Sometime time frame may be different. Population that is being studied in America, it has been done. Now it is being done in India. It has not been tried here. So you can have different aspects go on coming daily. You can do a research on some new aspect of it. And in COVID times, I think you will get many new aspects. Even for old things, you will get new aspects in COVID. Thank you, Dr. Yash, for the question, and thank you, Dr. Binita. I request all to please type the questions, because we will be starting now with the next presentation. Thank you, Dr. Binita.
Thank you, Dr. Amit. Thank you so much.
So I would invite Dr. Binita now for her. Dr. Farah. So Dr. Farah Khalik is in physiology department in UCMS, and she will be taking us through a very important topic that is on searching the literature. That is the beginning actually of the thesis. When you start searching the literature, then only you know what things have been done and what things have not been done. As Dr. Yash had asked this very important question, what is new? So when you look at the literature, you will find that there are many things that have not been explored yet, and you through your thesis can do that. How to search, that is a very important skill. And I would invite Dr. Farah. Dr. Farah, just to give you one information, some students have messaged that the faculty should go a little slow in the speaking because of the internet transmission and all. If we go a little bit even faster, then the students are not able to comprehend. So that is the only thing I want to convey. Thank you very much, Dr. Farah. So please go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. I'll be presenting on research in biomedical literature. So I think most of you have already got into this topic and have started searching literature on the topic. So today's learning objective will be to understand schematic approach to search and learn how to use PubMed, understand and use Boolean operators.
Dr. Farah, sorry to interrupt, your audio is not clear.
Understand and use Boolean operators. Is it better, Dr. Amin, now?
No.
Hello?
Yes.
Is it better?
Seems to be better. Can you keep the mic closer a bit?
Yeah, I'm taking the mic closer. To develop a search strategy, use mesh and filters to refine your search, and save, email, and download citations. Is it better, Dr. Amit?
Just somewhat better.
So this is suppose a research question which is coming to your mind. Does chronic exposure to mobile phones affect cognition? So in order to search for this particular research question, what are you going to do? Either you'll be searching the journals or books to go to library, various places, or you will search the internet. That is the most common thing people do these days. They search, they go to Google and they search whatever is the topic, right? So what happens? So what happens is that there is information overload. Right? So there is information overload. So actually, once you are going for the scientific literature search, what you need to do is, even if you are doing it in the Google, it's better to go and try the Google Scholar. Because in general Google, what you get is lots of things which are there in the newspapers and a lot of other things. So
Dr. Farah, please, sorry to interrupt. The audio is not clear. Yesterday, when we had a practice session, you used this system only?
Yeah, I use this system. I tried with another system.
Audio for audio, I think it was something different because the disturbance today is a lot.
Ma'am, are you using a headphone?
Can you hear better now?
Are you using a headset?
No, I was using the earphone. Now I have removed the earphone. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, now it is better.
Now it is better.
So I removed the earphone. Okay, so what I was discussing was that if you just go to Google and search the literature, there will be a lot of overload of the information, because anything which is non-scientific also will be there, and you will be confused what to do and what not to do. So the better option will be Google Scholar, because here you are going to get the scholarly articles, the scientific articles, and which are reviewed, so this will be a better option. But for medical professionals, the best one is the PubMed. PubMed is a free and dedicated database for biomedical literature, and it offers a lot of advanced features. So we will be going in subsequent slides, seeing what is all there in the PubMed. So before going there, let me have a poll. One is a poll, and let's see. Tom, can you have the first question of the poll?
Yes. Dr. Yes.
Yeah, launch the poll. Yes,
You have started.
Yeah.
You closed the poll. Dr. Farah, you closed the poll. The poll is closed, Dr. Farah. You have closed it accidentally.
Okay, I'll open it again.
You can't launch it again.
Okay, we cannot do. All right. I just wanted to ask that how many of you have used PubMed? Anyway, we'll go ahead with it. So I was discussing the PubMed, how it is important, and we'll be going through the PubMed because this is basically dedicated for the biomedical literature search. So I'll be telling you what all can be done and what not to do when we are searching the literature on PubMed. So if we have a research article, we are supposed to search on this particular research question, that does chronic exposure to mobile phones impair cognition in children. So for each research question, as just now Dr. Vinita has said, that it can be divided into number of components. We have explained it very well, the TICO model. That is how we can divide the research question into different components. That is P is for patient or population problem, I is for intervention or exposure, C is comparison, and O is outcome. So for this particular research question, the patient population here is children. The intervention which we want to explore is the mobile phone exposure. Comparison is not applicable here, and the outcome is impaired cognition. So we need to keep in mind the keywords once we are starting search in the PubMed. Once you open the website of the PubMed, you will see that how we can search the things, but we have to put the keywords, and these keywords are usually picked up from these the components of the system. Another important aspect is that we should not use stop words. Like these words which are listed here, they are all stop words. So we don't need to type does, mobile phone exposure, or to, or in, or all these type of words which are in here. We don't need it. We just need to type the keywords while we are searching the feature. Now there are certain Boolean operators like or, and not. These are the three Boolean operators. Now if I type or in between my two keywords, suppose my two keywords are mobile phone and cognition, and if I type or in between them, that means all the articles pertaining to mobile phones, that is those depicted in this blue circle, are all the articles which are pertaining to mobile phones, and all the articles pertaining to cognition are depicted in the yellow circle. So all these articles which are either of mobile phones or of cognition will be displayed in the list. Okay, but in case of or, if I use and, like mobile phones and cognition as you can see here, so only those research articles which contain both these terms, mobile phones and cognition, only these articles will be selected. So this will be better once we are specifying or we are focusing on a research where mobile phones are tested for impairing cognition or whatever it is, how it is in cognition. So in that case, if we use and in between, that will be a better option. On the other hand, if we use not, the third Boolean operator is not, if we use that, it will have all the articles, it will give you all the articles which are related to mobile phones, but not including the ones which is carrying cognition. It will be only the blue aspect. Wherever cognition is treated, only those articles will come in your criteria. Okay, so these are the three Boolean operators, or, and not, and you have to use them accordingly, whatever you want to search. So I'll just give you an example on the PubMed, how to open the PubMed, because some of you may be new to the PubMed and may not have started searching. So you just need to type PubMed and just go to its site, and this site, this PubMed has revised this site, and the new site has been developed just 3 months back. Maybe a new site of PubMed has been devised. It's nice and it detects many things automatically. Okay, so if I suppose I now just a view of this site, you can see it's installed down here, and you can see that it has got a number of options how to learn with the aspects, to find things, download and explore, and all these things are there on that site. Okay. So now if I type something here, suppose I'm typing mobile phone here. Okay, I go to search, and once I click search here, I will be getting this new fresh page of PubMed where lot of functions are detected. Now, right now, I want to show you how to put the Boolean operators and how the results are going to change if I do that. If I put or here and write cognition, and then click search button here, what do I see? Once I put or in between the two keywords, whatever keywords I'm using, once I put or and see the search, here what I'm seeing is 26,240 results. Okay. So this is quite a lot of results. It contains all the articles pertaining to mobile phones and all the articles pertaining to cognition. Now I'm going to change this or to and. In block letters, I'll be writing and again click search. And what I see is just 54 results. So now these are the results, 54 are the results which contain both these terms together. Okay. Similarly, I can use not also in this place. So in that case, I will get all the articles results and I think it's not including cognition, maybe it's something else in this. So this is how we are going to apply the little operator. So coming back to my so whatever you can see by putting or on and I have taken the pictures of that and focus here. So these are the operators and they must be in capital letters only. If it is in lowercase, then it will be replaced by and. And in the new PubMed, another thing is if you are not applying any Boolean operator, suppose if you are not writing anything in between your two keywords, then automatically by default it will use it as and. And this is considered as an and then it is person. Audio terms is crucial, that I will explain later. And the fourth, the here we can see diabetic retinopathy is there, which if we just type diabetic retinopathy, it will read it as diabetic and retinopathy, and it is going to search all the articles pertaining to diabetes and all the articles pertaining to retinopathy. So if you just want the articles of diabetic retinopathy, what you need to do is put it in the code, that is inverted commas. So if you just put, as I have done it here, just put diabetic retinopathy in inverted commas, it is just going to pick up all those articles which are having diabetic retinopathy. So individually, it is not going to pick up all the diabetes articles, so that will be very large number of articles and activities to do. So coming to a research question here, I'll tell you how step-wise we have to search on a particular research question. This is one of the research questions I've put here. Does renal impairment increase mortality risk in type 2 diabetes mellitus? So again, population here is type 2 diabetes. Determinant here is renal impairment, and outcome is mortality. Okay, so whatever is the research question, we have to split it into its components. And once we split it into its components, then we go into research, into the detailed search of it. So first of all, we'll be searching one by one. This component one by one. The first component, as you know, is population. Then it's not that the population is just one term. There will be different components of that population, like type 2 diabetes can be written as non-insulin dependent diabetes. So there are a number of families. Some of the articles which are writing it as NIDDM will not be picked up if they are just writing type 2 diabetes. Right? So we have to write the main term of the population and all the other families which can be related to it by incorporating or in between these or the first search. This will be our first search, that is the population. Second will be the determinant or its family. Again, here it can be renal, it can be kidney, it can be glomerular, or it can be albuminuria. Whatever terms you think of in that particular context. Third search can be of the outcome or its phenomenon, like it can be mortality, it can be death. So these will be the three searches, and the fourth will be the combination of all these three types, like the combination of the population and its phenomenon, dependence and its phenomenon, outcome and its phenomenon. So that will be the complete step-by search for your particular research question. So this is done by using the advanced search option in the PubMed. Right? There's an option known as advanced search, and then it's better to use catalog extract and then search it. So you can see here, if you open the PubMed, this just below what we have searched now, we get an advanced search option. So if you just click this option, you will be landing up in this page, which is the PubMed Advanced Search Index. Right? So let me repeat here. When you're doing the advanced search, first of all, you have to put the keywords and then put, or even if you don't put, just click to the advanced search option. And once you click to the advanced search option, you will be clicked on to this advanced search filter page. And here you can see the field, and then you can enter your search options here. Right? The search options, once you click add here, it will come in this particular box. And gradually you keep on adding all your search options. They will be added up in the history, and then you have to combine this and then search it. I just explain it on the PubMed itself. So in this example, the population will be typing here type 2 diabetes or non-insulin dependent diabetes. Then determinant will be typing all your findings there. Then on here, what happens is, like I can show you here, it keeps on building up here. Right? It keeps on building up here, then the outcome also keeps on building up here, and then you have to include all these in the final. So I'll just go to the PubMed again and just demonstrate this particular part. I'll just remove this particular this one, and I'll write type 2 diabetes. Okay, and I'll just search, and I'll just click this advanced search option. Once I click advanced search option, there is a page which I was telling you about, and this is all fields written here. So in this, you need to click here and scroll it down till you get title or extract. Because it's better to search these terms in title or extract, and then you can type your word here, like type 2 diabetes. Once you type your word here, you can click add. You can see that it has come down in the table box, it has been added here. Then you can write the synonym here. I will write NIDDN. And when you are adding it here, just click add with or, because now it is a synonym. So it will be either type 2 diabetes or NIDDN. That means when a person is searching, he will search the article on diabetes which use either of these terms. Either the term used is type 2 diabetes or the term used is NIDDN. So both of these will be searched. So now once you have done one aspect of it, say competition you have done or one aspect of it, then you add to the history. You click here, add to the history, and you can see here lower down that it has been added up in the history. See here, it has been added up in the history. Right? Now go for the next term. Next term was your next term is regional. Okay, you add here, again click here, add here, then you can put Sydney here, put or, and it will be added up here. Maybe I'll write Albans area. With or, so all these terms are added up. Again, you can click here and write add to the history. Right, so everything will be added to the history. Similarly, you can write the third component of it, mortality. So whatever is pertaining to the article, we know, and we have seen that everything has been added to the history. So once these all terms and synonyms are added to the history, then there are, so you can see the details, you can click here and see the details, what has been added up. Here are the actions. Now in actions, we can add queries. All these queries can be added up in this box, in this one. This end, we have added the second term. Then we can add the third one, which we have searched. So all the things have been added up. And once all these things have been added up, then we can click the icon on search here. And once it has, we have clicked the search, we will get all the searches related to this particular. Okay, so all the terms have come here. The synonyms were staged before, and the other terms were staged with them. And you can see that all these have searched, all these things, 3,160 searches are got, this many results are got here. Now the new PubMed, which is seen here, you can see there are a number of new options here. Even those who have searched them earlier, you can see that there are a number of options here. What you can see here, this is the graph, and it is showing that how many researches are done in various years. So if I enlarge this particular graph from here, you can see that how many are done in these years. Now I don't want the previous one. Suppose I don't want what is done in 1988 or whatever. So I can just stretch, I can put my mouse here and just stretch it here, because I just want it to be included from 2000 to 2020. So if I do this, then my first will be changed, and whatever publications are done during just the period between 2000 and 2020, only those publications will appear. Only those publications will appear. Now, other things what we can do while we are searching this is we can apply different types of filters. Now, on the left side, you can see there are a number of things written here. So these are filters, right? Like abstract, you don't just want abstract, or you want free full text only, so you have to click this box. If you just want free full text articles, you don't want abstract and other things. If we go down, what we see is that there are books, documents, or documents, clinical trials, or suppose I just want the review articles on this particular topic, so I will just click review, and if you just select all the reviews which are done on this particular topic. So now I will get into the reviews which are done. When you click from here now, the graph, I can review from here. So now I have selected one filter, that is review. Next thing, I can select is what I want, like I can select the years from the previous graph which I told you, or we can select from last 5 years, last 10 years from here also. We can select the language. By default, it will be giving us in English, but we can select otherwise also. Other animals or human beings, age, we can select the age from here. Here you can see the figures of age given here. And there are additional figures. If you think of that we can have simple results by this, to give the additional figures, you take number of things. Let's suppose someone is doing on animals and not doing on humans. So you can take artificial animals, or you can take humans. If you are research on humans, just keep it away. Language, as I told you, there are all the languages available here, apart from English. So if you want by default, you can select English, but otherwise, whatever language you want, that can be there. You can select you want to do Russian communication or Russian communication accordingly, you can select those articles. Then what particular subject you want to select, which type of journals you want to select, the dental journals or the nursing journals, you can select language or medical journals. And there's a whole list of age groups which we need to select. Like if you are working on the children, children or children of 6 to 12 years, in that case, you need to select just that particular group. Otherwise, you will be unnecessarily getting so much filter, which you don't need. So you can select accordingly, and then the result will appear. So I hope advanced course is a bit clear, and I think I will give you few exercises. Then if you can practice it, if those who have signed in via your laptop, that will be easier for you to document that. Let's go to the next option in the PubMed, and that is field search. By field search, we mean that we want to search a particular topic only in the title. That means that particular topic or that particular keyword should be present in the title, or it should be present in the title and abstract, or by journal name, or by author's name. You can search the author. A particular author, I want to search how many publications you have. You want to search how many publications your supervisor is having. So that way. So whenever we search accordingly, you have to write that particular name, put a square bracket, and write that particular. Like if I am searching for author, I will write the name of author, put a square bracket, and write AU in the square bracket. That means that only the authors in that particular name will come. Okay. Similarly, for volume, issue, page, everything you can search according to that particular field. So here is one exercise which I want you to do. If you are on your laptop, you can open another window and open the PubMed and search the articles of your supervisor. Or this is one example I have given. Search the articles of Dr. H.C. Madhu. Dr. H.C. Madhu is an eminent clinician of our college and a very good research person. So while you are searching the articles, like if you are searching for Dr. H.C. Madhu, how you need to type the name of the author in the search internet, that you have to write the last name first. It could be Srinath Madhu and then the initial. And then square bracket, AU written up in the square. If you do it that way, you can easily search the articles published, what you have published, because later on when you will be taught the differences, you will know that why last name and searching on, because that is the way to type it in the public. So all those who are on laptop, or even if you are on mobile, you can open another window and start searching it. I'll just give you 2 minutes. Let's see if you are getting some results. Okay, so I hope you must have searched this particular thing. So when I typed it here and searched it, what I was able to get was about 130 videos. Okay, so while you are searching for your author, by the author, this is what I was telling about the author field. While you are searching by the author, if you want to search the publications of a particular author, you have to write the last name of the author, followed by initials, then in square brackets, write CV, that is for author, and you will get the result, number of publications which that particular author is having. Now this is another question which you can do. If your guide told you to search for an article he read on diabetes published by Professor S.C. Madhu in Functional Neurology Journal. Okay, so here you are having two things to do. One is you have to search the author, and one is you have to search the journal. So for this, you need to write the name of the author in the same way as you have written earlier, right? And in between, and then write the name of the journal, and in the square bracket, write JOAR. Right? So by doing this, you will come to exactly this particular article, that particular article which we have. Although you are doing it hands-on, please type in this way, then only you will learn. Write the name of author and the journal in the square bracket. Put AG for the author and JOAR for the journal, and you are going to get exactly what article you are doing. So here I have done this in the content, and we come exactly to that particular article which we were doing. I think I'll continue with the other functions. Now, the other functions are, while you are searching, you can do comprehensive search using bypass. What do we understand by it is that there are certain terms which are can be expressed in different ways, like prevention. Prevent can be expressed as prevention, or preventive, or preventable. So there are certain terms. So in that case, what we need to do is put that term prevent, put an asterisk after that, and put it in inverted commas. So that it will include all the terms which start with the prevention. Prevention, preventive, and preventable. And it's very important here when you have certain terms which have a different spelling in American English and different in British English. So in that case, like here we have in India, where you have different spellings. So if you do it this way, it will include all the terms which start with this particular word. Okay. So here I think I should quickly write that. That means all those terms which have different spellings, you have to use the initial word which is planning for law, put an asterisk, put it in inverted commas, so that it includes all the words which are starting from this particular. Another thing is next word, that is medical practice. They are systematic keyword catalog. Okay, that is there inbuilt in the format, and it keeps on building and it keeps on revising it and adding and deleting it. It is based on the pattern and that word. The certain subject terms are selected and approved for use by analysts. Okay, so these are next terms. They are also there, and when we were searching, when we were doing the advanced search, here when we do the drop box, you can see that here they are written next terms. So if you want to search for next terms, whatever your keyword is, you will get lot of sentences already together, and you can select them and accordingly you can using these. So I have already told you how you can use filters. Like you can use the time filter, and I already told you on the first one, like in the past 5 years you want, the past 10 years you want the search to be there, you can click that button of time filter. You can take any of these filters for search, for age, for article type, like just review article or clinical trial, so whatever you want to do, you can do that and search for your filter. So what will happen is that you will go to exactly what you want to search, and you will not be worrying with so many other things which will be there. So those who are trying, they can try it out. It's resulting these two keywords, quantity and English, by using these filters, participate for last 10 years, and age you can get from the
हाँ सर आवाज तभी कम आ रही है यही तो ऑफ था ये कहाँ आया ये कैसे आया
Okay, so what I'm going to say by using filter, it's not an information overload, it's a filter area basically. When you think that there is an information overload, and whenever you are searching, when you're trying to query comes from most of the pages that so much literature available on this topic, and I'm not getting the exact thing which is going on, or that topic we are not getting the literature. So that is because you are not using the filters appropriately. If you can use the filters appropriately, what exactly you want to do, in which particular group you want to do, then your first will be much better. Now coming to the next thing which I can show you in the PubMed is the display settings. So I'll just go back to the PubMed. So here you can see there are display options sitting there on this side. And once you click them, you will get all the options what you want. Like if you want summary or you want abstract for a particular topic which you have selected or the thing you have selected, so you can click here. It can either display by best match or it can also display by other options like maybe some latest old ones and so on. Okay. So there are a number of other things like in the display options, like how many articles you need to display, systematic display, whether you want it is 20 on one page or you can see either if you want 20 on one page, 60 on one page, 100 on one page, whatever. So all these options you can try out and use. And once you have seen all these, you have configured these filters, you have closed all this. The last thing which comes is the filtering. So you can use by this save option. You can name your results, whatever is not selected. You can send it by clicking with the send it. You can send it to the clipboard. You can send it to bibliography or your collection. And the best thing is that you yourself open your account and login in here. You can see a login button here. So first you can open your account and login into your account. And once you open your account, all the searches which you are doing, you can just save it to your account. So that next time when you come and say, you are not, you know that what you have searched yesterday, and now you can continue with your searches again. Because it takes a lot of time to search the relevant things. So you can open your account and just open that. You can save it as various places, and then also you can create a file and save it as it is. So these are the saving options, and the next option is what I should say here is user guide. So whatever things, because of the urgency or whatever issue I am not able to understand, I would suggest go to the user guide and click whatever aspect you are not able to understand, and you will easily understand it by using this feature. It's very, very helpful. The number of videos also stay here, so you can understand it. So I told you about the display setting. Save search by signing to NCBI account. You can have your NCBI account in this way, as I told you, or login as I told you, the working where you can login, have your account, create your account, and save it. So we have covered all these aspects today. That is what is PubMed. You have to first of all pick a search topic in your search. Divide the topics into concepts. You have to search the keywords or subject headings, combine the concepts with review materials like and, all, or not. Then you have to define your search to date or categories, etc., and appropriate when you do the filters. And finally, you have to save your search. So that's all.
Thank you, Dr. Farah. I think before I say anything, I should apologize to all the students for the poor audio quality. The audio was very problematic. I got many messages and even I was not able to get the whole thing. But the saving grace was that it was some demonstration part was there. And to some extent that demonstration part could be followed. So
I'm really sorry for the audio, but for all the participants also, I would also like to say sorry.
ऑडियो का इशू काफी हुआ है इसके अंदर आज जो है, I don't know. We even practiced on Sunday. At that time, I don't know how it was okay, but today when we see, I myself am surprised how it is so different than Sunday. So it's okay. Now, thank you, Dr. Farah. The students can contact you later if they want to, if they have any queries, and we will share the recording with the students.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So the next presentation is by Dr. Shiva. Aim, objectives, and outcome measures. So when you when you start your protocol, the key component is the objectives. What objectives have you set is very important, and how you write objectives, the objectives will determine your methodology, your results, your discussion, everything. So the next presentation, let me, Dr. Okay, so Dr. Shivanarang, over to you.
Okay. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
And my screen is visible?
Yes, visible.
Okay. So I would like to thank Dr. Amir for making me the presenter and giving me this opportunity to present. And thank you, Dr. Farah and Dr. Binita, to make my work easier. So I would be taking you through aims and objectives today. The aim, objective, writing aim, objective, and outcome measures. So you already have been through the research question, which is, I'm not able to move the slides. Just a moment, please. So you have, at the end of this session, you would be able to understand difference between aim, objective, and outcome measures. This is the aim of my session, and you will make some progress towards writing aim, objective, and outcome measures for your research protocol. So by now, you must be all of or any of these things. You might be very lost, confused, unsure, going through so much of literature. You have so many of questions popping up in your minds. And through our previous session, you might have zeroed on a research question, which, as Dr. Binita told, that through the FINER and the PICOT protocols, you must have narrowed it down to a narrower category, a broad category to a narrower category, but still, they are still quite broad. So writing aim and objective is like providing direction to your research. It is the primary focus of any research project, and it's usually expressed in terms of aim and objectives. It is the foundation of any research protocol, and without it, you cannot go ahead. Should it be decided, and they should be decided and written at the very beginning of your research projects, not at the last. Anyone who is going through your research project should be able to view them in the very beginning, on the first page or the second page of your research write-up. So coming to the definitions, I will take you through the definitions, and then we will have several examples. So coming to the aim is a statement of intent written in a broad term. It reflects the general purpose of the study, and it answers to the question that what are you doing? An objective would be a goal or the steps which are taken towards meeting your aim, how you will achieve it. So objective spells out exactly what one intends to do in the study. It answers the question how. So what and how. Usually, as we had talked about the PICO, which is the population intervention comparator and outcome, which was a part of research question also. A objective also has good elements, and preferably all of them should be there. Otherwise, they won't be doable. For the acronym we follow for formulating a objective is SMART, which is specific, it should be precise, and we should try to include population, intervention, comparator, and outcome all. But it is not necessary that you include all, as I will elaborate in the example subsequently. It should be measurable. Of course, what you are doing, you have to measure it. It cannot be abstract. It should be achievable. Don't attempt a very ambitious thing. You or being initiated to research. So you don't have to do something very much out of the box. It should be achievable and doable, realistic in the present circumstances, and of course time bound. So objectives can be primary or secondary. Usually for you, there is only one aim and one primary objectives, because that would be doable. You can have many, but one would be achievable. And a secondary objective is not exactly a part of your protocol. It is just a byproduct of what you are doing. And as you try to achieve your primary objectives, you find some secondary findings also, which can contribute to secondary objectives. It's a byproduct which is not directly contribute to fulfill the aim of the study. Then we have outcome measures. So outcome is another extension of the objectives. What are you doing through the objectives to achieve the end results? An outcome is a way the thing turns out, a consequence. So an outcome is the end result in context of medical research. It is usually expressed in terms of mean, medians, ratios, and all the mathematics. So a few points which I want to highlight is that aims and objectives should be articulated to go in a flow. You cannot be ambiguous about it, or aims or objectives do not match, because if you do so, then you will have achieved something entirely different from what you started with. So they have to be defined in the beginning. It is sometimes easier to write the outcomes first and then come back and write the objectives, which again I will elaborate in the examples, that when you know what you want at the end, it's always easier to come back and write how to achieve it. If you really don't know, then it would be difficult. If you struggle to explain in simple one-liners, you can ask yourself, or your friend may ask you that, what is your research? And if you are still struggling with the answer, you might need to redefine your aims and objectives and make them more precise. Objectives are not methods. Methods would be taught to you subsequently. They are not methods, they are headings of the methods. They just tell the way how would you be doing. Methods would be come up next in the next few sessions, not today. So coming directly to the example. So again, just a recap, if some might have found me very fast. So you have aim and objective. Aim again is a primary focus of the research projects, and it is the foundation of research project. Aim answers the question what you are doing. It is a broader term. Research, it is narrower than the research question, but it is broader than the objective. Objective is again the steps you take towards meeting the goal, and how do you plan to do it. Outcome measures would be the measurable outcomes of whatever you have achieved through the objectives. So coming to the first example, we have a research question. What is the burden of bacterial infections in patients with chronic liver disease? So the aim would be very simply, I have not gone into very complicated stuff. So to study the burden of bacterial infection in chronic liver disease. So it's just an extension of your research question. Now coming to the objectives. You have written the objectives as a primary objective and secondary objective. So in this, you always keep improving. I had written to look for symptoms and signs of infection in patients with chronic liver disease based on standard clinical history and examination. So whenever you are writing the objectives, the words we often use are action verbs. We try not to use abstract words. So you use to determine, to compare, to verify, to calculate. Definite words need to be used so that your intent is clear. So action verbs are preferably non-action verbs such as appreciate or ascertain or understand or work out or acknowledge or recognize should be avoided. Sometimes they are unavoidable, but you should try to avoid and stick to action word such as verify, record, isolate. So we have here to record symptoms and signs of infections in patients with chronic disease based on standard clinical history and examination. A second objective is to isolate the pathogenic bacteria by gram stain and culture in patients with chronic liver disease. So in this objective, we have the population, which is patients with chronic liver disease. This is the population. Then you have the I stands for intervention. Intervention means what you are doing to achieve this. In the patients of chronic liver disease, you have a standard clinical history and examination and isolation of pathogenic bacteria by gram stain or culture. These both are interventions you are doing. And what would be your outcome? You would know that what are the infections in the patients of chronic liver disease. And in this, the comparator, we don't know whether we have a comparator. When you read about the study designs, then we will know that whether we would have a comparator in this group or not on the type of study you are doing. If you have a control group, suppose a healthy control is taken in this patient, in this group of patients with this age and sex match controls are taken, then you will have a group to compare to. So there will be all the 4 PICO elements. In this, we only see 3. Secondary objective is to determine the clinical stage of liver disease. Again, it is a byproduct. When you record the clinical history and examination, you will obviously come to know about the stage of the liver disease, which is a byproduct of your work. The outcome measures would be, again, written as same extension of the objectives, primary outcome measures and secondary outcome measures. The primary outcome measure would be a prevalence of bacterial infection, again mathematical, in patients of chronic liver disease. And secondary outcome measure would be a correlation of stage of liver disease with the infection. So we can move on to the second example. I have 5 or 6, several of them for you. We have here the research question. What is the burden of type 2 diabetes in Delhi? This is the question which is coming to your mind. So how do we go about it? I have slightly modified and jump to the outcome measure. You want to measure the burden of type 2 diabetes in patients coming to GTB hospital. The research question was, what is the burden? So burden was broad. You have narrowed it down, your setup, hospital, and your setup, you have further narrowed it down to medicine OPD only, not any other OPD. So there is a narrowing down towards reaching your goal. So that is the aim. Further, how would you do it? Would be the objectives, but you can do it the other way now, that at the end of doing this, what do you exactly want from this? You want the prevalence of type 2 diabetes in the patient coming to medicine OPD in GTB hospital. So going back to the object, you have the outcome in your mind, you have an aim in your mind. With that, you can easily write a primary objective that you would perform oral glucose tolerance test of all patients coming to the medicine OPD. That will give you the prevalence of disease in the patients coming to the medicine OPD in GTB hospital. This is a very simplified form to make you write easy, understandable, and definable objectives. Obviously, there would be a fine tuning and there would be some complexities. This is just been simplified to make you understand. And going on to several other examples, I will just walk you through them slowly. Suppose we have a research question. What is the role of oral vitamin D supplementation for management of severe pneumonia in under 5 children? So this is a single page glance of this. It was more of a group activity which was planned in the previous years, which is not possible, of course, this year. What is the role of vitamin D supplementation for the management of severe pneumonia in under 5 children is the research question. So again, this research question has been narrowed down to determine the role of oral vitamin D. To determine, again, you see, it is defining a broader question of oral vitamin D supplementation for management of severe pneumonia in under 5 children. For this, the objectives would be to assess the clinical benefit of oral supplementation of vitamin D in addition to the standard antibiotic and other supportive therapy to hospitalized under 5 children with severe pneumonia. So here you have a population. A population is under 5 children with severe pneumonia, hospitalized under 5 children with severe pneumonia. Then you have a intervention, that is supplementation of vitamin D in addition to the standard therapy. You have a intervention. Then you have a outcome, which is the clinical benefit, the assessment of the clinical method and the benefit of vitamin D supplementation. So you have a pico elements evident in this objective. Then you have the outcome. These secondary outcome could be a part of primary as well. It's not necessary that they should be secondary, but for this question, the researcher has taken the time to resolution of severe pneumonia as the primary objectives. So it totally depends. It doesn't matter that you take the other duration of hospitalized, time of resolution of fever or tachypnea or inability to feed as secondary objectives, because once you do the clinical assessment, they can as well be included in the primary objectives because this is the part of the clinical assessment. However, you won't be totally wrong in including them in the secondary objectives. Ultimately, it would be a part of the clinical benefit to the patient. Then coming to another research question. We see that what is the clinical profile and outcome in the children with liver abscess. Again, this is in a tabular form. We see that what is the research question is, what is the clinical profile and outcome in the children with liver abscess? Again, you have a population of children with liver abscess. You want to see the outcome and you want to see the clinical profile. There is no intervention we see in the research question. Now we move ahead. Intervention is the observation. You're just observing the patient. So to study the clinical profile and outcome in the, so to study is the intervention, you are studying it. To study the clinical profile and outcome in the children with liver abscess. So coming to the primary objective, to describe the clinical profile and outcome in the children with liver abscess. Here you have a population of children with liver abscess. You are studying, the intervention would be you're observing, and the outcome would be what is the clinical profile of the patient. So you don't have all the elements necessarily in all the systems. There would be a comparator if you take healthy controls with these children. So we have to describe clinical profile outcome in children with liver abscess in terms of duration of clinical symptoms at presentation, etiology of liver disease, fever resolution time, duration of reduction of abdominal pain and tenderness. You can go on considering that you are studying the clinical profile and the outcome by observing the children, and the size of liver abscess and cavity on admission at but you will have to define that when you are going to start the study and to finish the study in your methods. The objectives are, these are just headings of your methods, that what you're exactly going to do, your steps towards achieving your aim, and to assess the development of complications, and you would be observing the patients for a set duration which would be detailed in the methods. Then you will have outcome, which would be again the extension. You will find the mean duration of clinical symptoms. You will establish the etiology, mean fever resolution time, and there would be many other derivatives from what you are studying. Another example is, does depression has any effect on mortality due to diabetic foot? Again, we have a tabular form. Does depression has effect on mortality due to the diabetic foot? So in this, the population is again the patients with depression and diabetic foot, or diabetic patients with diabetic foot who are depressed. To assess the role of depression and mortality among type 2 diabetes with diabetic foot. So the objectives is again to evaluate it over 18 months. So you are evaluating, which is the intervention, you're evaluating them over 18 months for depression, and they are associated, whether or not it is associated with mortality. So now the outcome would be mortality at 18 months and correlation of depression to mortality. So I think these are the examples, and then I will take questions. I thank Dr. Amar again for providing me with this material, and you have to keep improving. That is the key.
Thank you. So we go on to the questions, and the question. So Dr. Manish Kumar from Noida, please unmute yourself and ask your question, Dr. Manish Kumar. Dr. Manish Kumar, can you unmute yourself? Or we go to the next person who is asking the question, Dr. Divya. Dr. Divya GS, please unmute yourself and ask your question. You have raised your hand. Next, I think Dr. Sana Ahmed.
Hello?
Yes,
Am I audible, sir?
you're audible, Dr. Sana. Please go ahead with your question.
Ma'am, I would like to ask, what is the ideal time that you would propose for like a
Can
study?
you be a little louder? I am not able to hear you.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes,
Am I
Sana.
audible now, sir?
Yes, better.
Ma'am,
Please.
ma'am, like in the last example you gave us the outcome, in the outcome you had written mortality at 18 months. Now,
Yes.
what would be the ideal, like as a tentative thing, like for all across all the departments, I would include everyone. What should be the ideal
Maximum, I would
minimum?
say that.
Yeah, the
Hmm.
minimum time limit that we should keep for the study.
Actually, you could have when you study the type of study designs, which is the subject tomorrow, then you will know that there are various types of study. Cross-sectional is a one-time study, and then there are follow-up study. Usually, what we we don't move beyond 6 months in our setup. Your thesis time is up to 18 months, but we usually don't move beyond 6 months because it is not feasible.
Feasible.
Recruitment delays and so many things, so we try to stick to as much as permissible, and obviously it will also depend on how long your topic requires an observation for. If something doesn't show effect in say 1 year, then you won't have any results to that. So it will
Exactly.
totally
That's
depend on what you are selecting as your topic. So you have to select that question on the basis of your resources and what are your time limitations. That's why we keep insisting on it should be feasible, it should be according to your resources and according to your setup.
okay, ma'am.
Thank you,
You cannot
Dr. Sana.
thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Shiva. I think the feasibility aspect is important, as Dr. Shiva has told. So depending on the time that is available, the protocol you cannot change in between. It is very difficult. It is nearly impossible to change the protocol. So whatever you mention, if you mention you will do it for 200 patients for 1 year or whatever, so you have to do that number of patients in that time. So be realistic. That is what is important, as Dr. Shiva has very rightly highlighted. We go to the next question is by I think Dr. Tamid. Yes, you are unmuted. Please ask.
Sir, regarding this objectives, ma'am has mentioned primary and secondary objectives. Is there any criteria or limitation with number of objectives which is included in the secondary objective? Is there, like, we can include any number of objectives, or
No,
So his question is, you can include how many
yeah.
objectives? Yes.
Yes. Okay. We say that you have one aim and one objectives, and whatever is the byproduct, 2 or 3 secondary objectives, if you are able to determine that, just to simplify matters. Otherwise, sky is the limit. But as we are introducing you to research and you have a relatively smaller time-bound projects, you stick to one aim, one primary objectives, and maybe 2 or 3 secondary objectives if it is permissible by your work. You can have more than one primary objective as well, but don't be too ambitious. Again, we keep on insisting that only. You don't have to be very ambitious.
okay,
It's just an introduction to research methods.
okay, ma'am. Thank you.
I saw Dr. Shiva once a study. Dr. Shiva, I saw once a study. It had 52 secondary objectives.
Yeah, sky is the limit, I told. Na?
That was a $1 million project kind of thing. But for thesis, we can't have so many objectives. We usually are able to do 4 or 5, one primary and maybe 2 or 3 secondary. That is all that we are able to do. But as such, there are no limits. Limit is money and time and manpower. That is the limit actually. Thank you, Dr. Shiva, for this response. And now I think Dr. Manish, would you like to ask your question? Can you unmute yourself now, Dr. Manish Kumar from Noida? Or Dr. Neha? Okay, Dr. Manish is here. Yes, Dr. Manish, please go ahead.
Sir. No, sir. Sorry, sir.
Achha, no questions. Okay, Dr. Neha, I can see your hand raised. So can you please so I think there are no questions as of now. So we will call it a day then. So thank you everyone. Thanks to Dr. Binita, Dr. Farah and Dr. Shiva Narang for the presentations. We are sorry for the poor audio quality in between. We will try to see how we can make it up. And tomorrow 5 o'clock we join, and tomorrow's sessions are now very important as we move ahead. The writing part of introduction writing, review of literature writing will be the first session, and material and methods by Dr. Rajarshi, and then choosing an appropriate study design by Dr. Ashish Goyal. So we will meet tomorrow, or you will join by the same link that you have got in your emails. So around 5 o'clock you join on the same, through the same link. Please keep on posting your questions on your WhatsApp group, and we will convey to the respective faculty members, and we will share resources also with you all in that WhatsApp group, as an what will be helpful for you in writing the protocol. So with this words, I will say bye to everyone, and thank you to everyone for your participation.